Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And I would say I do casually follow the NBA, not as, let's say, as much as I follow the Calgary sports teams, with the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, which that's what I mostly do and talk about on my YouTube channel. So if that sounds like you'd be interested to watch, I always say to follow along this Calgary sports fan's journey. So make sure you hit like, subscribe. I did make my bracket challenge for my picks for the Stanley Cup Playoffs, so you can see those videos. However, I just say, just for the heck of it, and their grand prize is also $1 million with the NBA. I decided to make my NBA picks and play their bracket challenge and share my picks who I think ultimately is going to win the NBA championship in the bubble in Orlando, Florida. Will Toronto do it again this year? Or does LeBron have another run in him with the Lakers this time? Or could Kawhi Leonard, who did it with the Raptors last year, do the same, but this time with the Los Angeles Clippers? Definitely, I won't have to say, first time in history that both the Lakers and Clippers are relevant. That's what I would have to say here, but it's definitely unusual circumstances here with sports right now, but it's definitely nice that sports is back, but definitely it's unique with the NBA how they did it by playing at the ESPN World Sports in Orlando, Florida. However, what it's worked with the NHL and the NBA so far, the one big number has been zero, has been no COVID cases in their bubbles, so games will continue on. So I'm definitely confident that the Stanley Cup will be awarded, as well as the Larry O'Brien Trophy. So I'll explain how I came up to my picks, and I also find that with the NBA in general, it seems to be harder to pick upsets, or you don't see upsets that happen as much in the NBA as suppose, let's say, the NHL is. Definitely has been upsets, and especially when you look at the play-in series. So let's take a look at my NBA picks, who I think ultimately is going to advance and ultimately going to win the NBA championship here. So in the Eastern Conference for round one, and you can definitely say in the NBA, the Western Conference is definitely a lot tougher than the Eastern Conference, but it always seems like that there you got the good teams, and then you got the great teams, and it's always like, oh, we'll just wait until we get to the championship, because that's who's ultimately going to be. And I would say I feel that's going to be the case with the playoffs here, even under these circumstances. So for the 1-8 matchup, you got the Milwaukee Bucks and the Orlando Magic here. So the Milwaukee Bucks, I break down the record in two different ways. There's the overall record and the bubble record. So the Milwaukee Bucks, they were 56-17 overall, but they were 3-5 in the bubble. While the Orlando Magic, the 8-seeded, they were 33-40, and they were also 3-5 in the bubble here. And then Milwaukee in the regular season, they all play their games in the regular season before the shutdown. Milwaukee was 3-0, so I figure Milwaukee will take this one in 5 games in the first round series. Should be easier to win. So the next, and it's bracketed playoffs in the NBA here. So you're going to have teams knowing here. So Milwaukee will take on the winner of the 4-5 series, the 4 Indiana Pacers and the 5 Miami Heat here. And I anticipate this one's definitely going to be a much closer series here, as Indiana, the Pacers were 45-28. However, Indiana definitely had a better time in the bubble with 6-2, while the Miami Heat were 44-29 overall. They were 3-5 in the bubble, so definitely you could see a little bit of a gap. However, the Miami Heat, they were 2-0 against Indiana in the regular season. However, Miami did lose to Indiana in the bubble, so it's definitely, I'm anticipating this is going to be a much closer matchup. But in this, ultimately, I picked Miami Heat to win, but it'll take 7 games. So you could say maybe that is a little bit of an upset. So I got the Miami Heat winning this one in 7 games. So the 3-6 matchup, you got the Boston Celtics, who are number 3, and the Philadelphia 76ers, number 6 here. The Boston Celtics, they were 48-24 overall. They were 5-3 in the bubble, while the Philadelphia 76ers were 43-30 overall, and they were 4-4 in the bubble. Philadelphia, though, actually was 3-1 against Boston in the regular season, but I think Boston is the better team, and I take Boston to win this one in 7 games as well. So there's going to be a couple good matchups that I would say in the Eastern Conference in the first round. And then the last series, you got the Toronto Raptors versus the Brooklyn Nets, the 2-7. As the Toronto Raptors definitely, I'm going to say, I like how the Raptors are looking right now. And it was as amazing as they have, as it was last year when they won and surreal too, I would say, when they won the NBA championship. I think the Toronto Raptors are definitely looking like to be the team to beat here, as they were 53-19 overall, and they were 7-1 in the bubble. And some say that the Toronto Raptors had the toughest schedule in the bubble, and they were 7-1. While the Brooklyn Nets, they were 35-37 overall, and they were 5-3 in the bubble. One will also say, as aware, that Kevin Durant sounds like he's just going to be available for the Brooklyn Nets. And some would say, yeah, the Raptors did beat the Golden State Warriors for the NBA championship, but they didn't have to face Kevin Durant. So that sounds like that he is going to be available. That could be a different X factor in this series. As the Toronto Raptors, they were 3-1 versus Brooklyn in the regular season. However, I think Toronto is the team to beat. How they looked in the bubble, I would give Toronto in 6 for this one if Kevin Durant plays. So that's who I have advancing in the first round. I got Milwaukee, Miami, Boston, and Toronto. So now let's shift our focus out to the Western Conference here, which definitely was a tougher conference. I would say more competitive, as that's why when they figured out the 22 teams that were going to play in the bubble here, they figured out who was still in a playoff spot at the time of the pause, and there were more teams still alive in the Western Conference than the Eastern Conference. However, there was actually only one play-in series required, as I'll get to shortly. As the 1-8 series is the Los Angeles Lakers will take on the Portland Trailblazers. As the Los Angeles Lakers, they were 52-19 overall, but they were 3-5 in the bubble. But the Los Angeles Lakers also knew they were going to the playoffs too. I don't know if you can factor that in. However, the Portland Trailblazers, they were 35-39. They were 7-2 in the bubble, but Portland was playing for their playoff lives here. And how they figured out the play-in series was needed. If a team that was in the 9th seed was within 4 or less games of the 8th seed, they would have a play-in series. And how it worked out was Portland was the 8th seed, and they had to take on the Memphis Grizzlies, who were the 9th seed here. If the Memphis Grizzlies would have made it to the playoffs instead of the Portland Trailblazers, the Memphis Grizzlies had to win both games in this weekend play-in series. However, it was Portland that won the play-in series, so they get the 8th seed. So that's how they had that extra game in the bubble. So Portland did win the play-in game against Memphis. Los Angeles actually went 2-1 against Portland in the regular season. I would say, just with LeBron alone, I like the Los Angeles Lakers to win this one. I'll give them 6 games because I think Portland definitely played tougher, played well for their playoff lives, and they had to win an extra game to get in the playoffs. So that's why I'll give Portland a couple of games. So the 4-5 matchup, this one's definitely going to be a very close series. You got the Houston Rockets, who were the 4th seed, going to take on the Oklahoma City Thunder. Houston was 44-28 overall, but they were 4-4 in the bubble. Oklahoma City were also 44-28 and 4-4 in the bubble here as well. So I definitely think this is going to be a much closer series in the regular season. Oklahoma City was 2-1 versus Houston in the regular season. So I would say here, the slight upset, the 5-way and the 4, although this is a very close matchup. I got Oklahoma City winning in 6 games. So the next series, 36 here, you got the Denver Nuggets taking on the Utah Jazz. This is also going to be another close series. As I said, the Western Conference is definitely the tougher conference in the NBA right now. The Denver Nuggets, they were 46-27 in the regular season overall. They were 3-5 in the bubble. While the Utah Jazz, they were 44-28 overall. They were also 3-5 in the bubble. In the regular season, though, the Utah Jazz were 2-0 versus Denver in the regular season. However, Denver did beat the Utah Jazz in a double overtime game in the bubble. So I'm going to say this will be another close series here. So I'm going to give the Denver Nuggets in 7 games, as this is another close series. And then the last series of the first round, you got the Los Angeles Clippers taking on the Dallas Mavericks, 2-7 in this one. The Los Angeles Clippers, they were 49-23 overall. They went 5-3 in the bubble, while the Dallas Mavericks, they were 43-32 overall. They were 3-5 in the bubble. Oh, this matchup I'm going to definitely say is going to favor the Clippers here, as the Los Angeles Clippers were 2-0 versus Dallas in the regular season. And Los Angeles Clippers also won against the Dallas Mavericks in the bubble. That's how I broke it up here, because you got the regular season with fans, and then you had the 4-month gap, and then in the bubble in Orlando. So I like the Clippers to win this one in 5 games. So to recap, my picks for the Western Conference winners is I got the Los Angeles Lakers, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Denver Nuggets, and the Los Angeles Clippers. So now if we go back to the Eastern Conference to set up the second round, you got the Milwaukee Bucks would take on the Miami Heat. And this one definitely is going to be very interesting, because in the regular season, the Miami Heat were 2-0 against the Milwaukee Bucks, and Milwaukee also won against the Miami Heat in the bubble. However, I say Milwaukee still looks like the team to beat, and Milwaukee probably wasn't taking the bubble as seriously because they knew their fate going in. So I'd like Milwaukee Bucks to win this series, but I'll take all 7 games because Miami matches up well, which then sets up this series with the Toronto Raptors and the Boston Celtics. And in this one here, actually the Boston Celtics, they were 2-1 against the Toronto Raptors in the regular season. And the only loss that the Toronto Raptors had in the bubble actually came against the Boston Celtics. However, I think Toronto still looks like a deep stacked team, well-developed team, and how well they did in the bubble despite the one game against the Boston Celtics. I got the Toronto Raptors winning this one in 6 games, so I got Milwaukee and Toronto winning in the second round of the Eastern Conference Playoffs. So now if we shift our focus out west, you will have the Los Angeles Lakers taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder if it happens here. And then this one here, definitely going to say will favor the Lakers, as Los Angeles was 3-0 versus Oklahoma City in the regular season, and Los Angeles also beat Oklahoma City when they were in the bubble. I would give Los Angeles 6 games in this one. Oklahoma City will probably pull out a couple wins in the series, so which will set up the other series. Is you got the Los Angeles Clippers taking on the Denver Nuggets, and in the regular season, they only played each other twice before the pause, and then going into the bubble, it was tied at 1-1, so each team won a game. However, the Clippers won their one game against the Denver Nuggets when they were in the bubble. So just like the Lakers, I like the Clippers to advance this one in 6 games. I'm going to say the Western Conference Series will definitely be a lot more competitive because of more talents in the West, which now will set up the conference championships, which I'm going to say most NBA fans will probably say we're just waiting for that. For the Eastern Conference, you got the Milwaukee Bucks taking on the Toronto Raptors, as they were definitely the top 2 teams in the Eastern Conference, and they kind of got everybody else. And I'm going to say they're ultimately primed to going to meet each other in the conference championship. Milwaukee did win 2-0 against the Toronto Raptors in the regular season. However, Milwaukee, they lost convincingly, or they lost to the Toronto Raptors in the bubble, as Toronto definitely was the better team. Given that this is going to be the powerhouse teams in the Eastern Conference, I'm going to say the Toronto Raptors are going to go back to the finals, but this one will need all 7 games. While the West, you got the Battle of Los Angeles, as you got LeBron and Kawhi. So if the Toronto Raptors do go to the finals, definitely a couple of storylines would be either will they face Kawhi Leonard, one of the players that helped them to win the championship last year, or LeBron James. He definitely has always had Toronto's number in the playoffs when he was a Cleveland Cavalier. Now, I'm going to say this one's definitely going to be another dandy with the Battle of Los Angeles in Orlando, Florida. This is 2020 after all. The Clippers actually went 2-1 against the Lakers in the regular season, but the Lakers won against the Clippers in the bubble here, and I'm just going to say LeBron James. He definitely has that presence in the playoffs. I'm going to say the Lakers are going to win this one in 7 games. So I'm going to say both conference championships, if it goes this way, we're going to both go 7 games, which will set up the NBA Finals. As you got the Los Angeles Lakers taking on the Toronto Raptors. And actually, this matchup, I would say, based on what we've seen in the regular season and the bubble, I think the Toronto Raptors to defend their title and win the championship again, as Toronto did win their only game against the Los Angeles Lakers in the regular season. And Los Angeles actually lost convincingly against the Toronto Raptors in the bubble. So that's where I like it. And Toronto will finally get the, win a series with LeBron James. As I would say, the Toronto Raptors will defend their title and win the championship again in 6 games again. This time it'll be in Orlando, Florida. So I'm going to say the Toronto Raptors are going to do what the Blue Jays did in 1992-93, win back-to-back championships. And definitely be interesting to see, as I remember the Toronto Raptors, when they first came in, they were the more healthier franchise than the Vancouver Grizzlies, who are now in Memphis. They had Vince Carter, but definitely was always a mediocre or bad team. But this Toronto Raptors team looks very convincing right now, and they look like the best team in the NBA. They definitely had the toughest schedule. They had the best record in the bubble. I like them to go all the way without Kawhi Leonard. So it would definitely be an interesting story if they either took on Kawhi or LeBron James. But it would probably be more satisfying if they beat the Lakers with LeBron James, because the Raptors never have beaten LeBron James in a series. And then the tiebreaker in the bracket challenge to complete it, the question he asked was the point of margin at the end of Game 1 of the NBA Finals. I'd just say 3. It's going to be a close series, but these are my NBA picks. I casually follow the NBA. I mean, most of my attention will still be on hockey and the Stanley Cup Playoffs, especially depending on how long the Calgary Flames go, or maybe any other Canadian team, and if there's any intriguing series. But I've also been keeping my eye on the NBA, just with their return to play plan, and I definitely made videos talking about the other leagues. And despite the fact that Florida has been hit hard with COVID, everybody's been in the bubble, and as long as everybody buys in, and it sounds like that's been the case, both with the NBA and NHL, that there has been no COVID cases. And now that, as we get into the playoffs and as teams get eliminated, it theoretically should be easier, as you have less people to manage. So I'm definitely confident that the Larry O'Brien Trophy will be awarded for the NBA, and I'm going to say the Toronto Raptors will bring it home for Canada, we the North, again. So what are your picks for the NBA playoffs, and who do you like to see go anywhere? Do you have any massive upsets planned? I rarely find upsets happen in NBA when compared to, let's say, football, but football is a 1-game playoff, and NHL definitely, there's a lot more parity I find in hockey, where you get a lot more upsets. But the NBA is just the way how teams are built, because you got the good teams and then you got the great teams, and it's always like, we'll wait till the teams play each other. Where definitely, especially with the few years ago, we're always like, it's going to be Cleveland and Golden State playing each other in the final, and I think they met in the finals three years in a row there. So, but I just say I like the Toronto Raptors to defend their NBA championship. So that's my bracket as a casual NBA fan, not hardcore. So you can agree or disagree, but that's the beauty with brackets and all of us having debates here. So anyway, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, home the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders. I mostly talk Calgary sports on my channel, but I also do follow other sports stories that interest me that I put on this channel. I also do personal vlogs, attempt at comedy, and also do share my experiences. Let's say I'm on the road or at a sporting event here, so if it all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey. If you know what you do, just make sure you subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below here. As the only basketball that Calgary's had in the past is another series that I've been doing on my channels. I've been calling it the Remember the Calgary series, where Calgary actually had some basketball teams, not NBA level, but you could see that, as Calgary did have a basketball team called the Outlaws in the semi-professional league. I would say the most famous basketball team that Calgary had was the Calgary 88s, where the best player from the 88s was Chip England, who I know is one of the assistant coaches for the San Antonio Spurs. And then also Calgary briefly had the Drillers and Crush in there was another rendition of the American Basketball Association, not the same league that competed with the NBA, but that's all I know about basketball. I like the NBA. It's a fun game to watch. It's definitely some intriguing storylines, and I also grew up in the 90s during the Michael Jordan era, and it was exciting when we did get the Toronto Raptors and briefly the Vancouver Grizzlies. And I do remember when they both play in the NBA in Canada, they used to have the Naismith Cup. It was James Naismith, who was the father of basketball, had the game. Although in the U.S., they had a preseason tournament. I did remember watching some Raptors and Grizzlies basketball live. That I would definitely would follow the NBA a lot more if it was in Calgary, but I know that the demand in the market is not there for Calgary to support a basketball team. But I've been to an NBA-ish game, but it was a preseason game in Calgary. And I know a few years ago, the Raptors also played a preseason game in Calgary where it sold out in the Saladome. So there is some interest there. I casually follow the NBA, and these are my picks, and that's just my take on basketball in general. As obviously my obsession is a lot more with hockey and the Canadian Football League with football and the Stampeders, but I do know the NBA exists. I also had fun playing NBA live games when I had more time to play video games in, so as well as NBA Jam during the 16-bit era. So that's my other addition beyond the bracket picks. So as I say here, I'll see you in the next video, and let's go Raptors, and let's go and win another championship and bring it home in Canada for Canada again. So I'll see you then.